Hi, I will show you how to create an end-to-end test of your sign-up flow. This is one of the most common tests that we have in Rainforest, as you can imagine, and it's normally pretty tricky to do right using automation because it has a bunch of interesting steps, such as email confirmations and so on, that are normally a little bit tricky. So let's get started. I'm going to use Airbnb as an example here because it's a page that everyone knows well, and it has a bunch of these interesting properties that will allow me to show you some of the more advanced functionality that we have in Rainforest. Before we start writing the test, let's go to Airbnb page and just have a look at the start of the sign-up flow to know how we want to test it. So to actually sign up for Airbnb, you need to click on this little avatar icon, click on the sign up link here, which brings up a model. And there are a couple of different ways of signing up. We'll be using the email option today. And that means we have to fill in this form with some name, data, email and password, and the birth date. And that will then take us through the verification flow. So let's jump in. I'm going to create a test that will be fully automatable, and you'll be able to cheaply run it quite frequently. And I already have Airbnb set up here as a site. If you don't, you can enter whichever URL you want to test in this Add New Site tab. We'll just use the one that we already have defined. That opens the view for creating a new test. And there are a couple of things happening here. The way we'll be creating this test is by adding actions one by one here on the left side. And as we're creating these actions, we'll be taking screenshots of the relevant areas of the page. And to take the screenshots, we have a terminal to the virtual machine here in the middle of the screen. That is a virtual machine that is launched in the cloud specifically for your test writing session. And you can use it to sort of play around and to figure out how to write your test and then to actually take the screenshots as well. And it starts up by navigating to the page that I specified up front. So now it's opened Airbnb, and you can see that I can control the terminal as if it was my browser. So as we've seen, the thing we want to do here is click on this avatar and click on the sign up link to get started. So I'm going to create the first action, which will be selecting something from a dropdown. That action takes two screenshots. The first screenshot is the area that you want to click on to actually open the dropdown. So this will be this little avatar icon. And once that's open, I'll also screenshot the sign up link that we want to click on. And now that the action is done, I'm going to select it and preview it. And preview means that my control from the terminal is temporarily taken away, and now automation is controlling the terminal, and I can see in real time what's happening. And this is going to be my workflow generally as we are going through and creating these actions. I'm going to play with the terminal myself to figure out what exactly I want to do. Then I'm going to create an action to do that, and then preview it to make sure that the action has the effect that I expect. So as you've seen, the action that I just defined for selecting sign up from the dropdown worked. So the next step is to click on continue with email. So now I can just create a click action for that specific button. And that's very simple. Just take a screenshot of that. And just like before, I'll select it and preview it to make sure that the click actually happens in the place that I expect, and it takes me to the form. Great. So now we have a couple of fields to fill in. And we have a fill action to do just that. So I'll define the first one to fill in the first name. So I'll capture this as the field that we want to interact with. And now we need to enter the value to paste into the field. So I could just hard code a name like Bob. And when I preview this action, what will happen is automation will focus on the field and paste in the value. And that's great, but maybe we don't want to always sign up as Bob. Maybe we want to have a larger, more diverse set of names to choose from. And for that, we have this feature in Rainforest that allows you to do just that. So instead of writing Bob, you can choose a step variable. And there are a couple of different kinds of step variables. Tabular variables are the ones you define yourself by uploading a CSV file, but there are also built-in variables. You don't need to set them up. They're right there. And one of them is random first name. And when I do this, instead of pasting Bob, it will randomly choose a first name from some large collection and paste that. The nuance here is that if I use this same variable twice in the same test, I'll get the same value twice. But the next time I run this test, I'll get a different value twice. So the values of the variables are consistent within the test runs, but they vary from one run to the other. So we've got the first name. I'm going to fill in the last name in exactly the same way. So a fill action, targeting this field. And here I'm just going to manually type into variable. And before I preview it, I'm going to also create very similar actions for email and passwords, and I'll do birth date in a little while. So another fill action for email. And the email one is actually interesting. So I'm going to also use random.email for this. And the cool thing about that is that this will give us an email address that can actually receive real email. So when we sign up to Airbnb using that email, we'll be able to open an inbox and receive that email and click on the verification link. And that's one of the really cool features that allows you to do full end-to-end tests, including email delivery and so on. Let me just create a couple more actions. So this one for password. And with the password, again, you can either use a step variable. There is one called random.password. Or you can just type in something. Both things will work. So to make sure that all these actions that we've just defined work as expected, I'm going to select all of them and preview them. And that will make them sort of play one after the other as I'm watching it in the terminal. And the little spinner here shows you which action is being executed right now. And once it passes, the status bar turns to green to indicate that it succeeded. So we got some random first and last name, also an email that is fairly long, but it's readable. And now we'll paste in the password. The password has some requirements, and they're all satisfied with the password I've selected. So that's great. Before I show you how to actually check the email, we have to deal with the birth date, and that's a little bit different. And depending on where you click in the field, it gives you an input for entering a date that has part of the date selected. So I'm going to create a click action, and because I want these things to happen in order, I'll just create this action in between the existing ones. So first, I want to click on the word birth date. But I don't want to click in the middle of it. I want to click on the side to make sure that the first part of the date is selected. And once I click on the side, I also want to type something in. And we have an action called type to do just that. And I'll just type in some numbers. 1st of January 1950. So let's try to replay or preview these actions once again to make sure it works. Great. Now you can actually see the date being typed, and that's all we need. Okay, that finishes our form. Let's create a click action for this button to agree and continue. And with some simple actions like clicks, I don't always replay them. I just execute them myself just because it might be sometimes more convenient. There's another click action for agree and continue again for a different set of terms and conditions. And once you click on that, you are also asked to continue creating your profile. So we'll go ahead and do that. And now there are a couple of optional steps. So I'm going to skip a couple of them. I don't really want to test adding the photo right now. And I also don't really want to test the phone number steps, so I'll skip that too. But that step is interesting. So this is the step that asks you to confirm your email. And to do that, we actually need to check this email, as I mentioned. So I'm going to create an action to navigate to a new page, and I'm going to do that in a new tab. And the page I'll navigate to will be an inbox, a web-based inbox corresponding to this random.email. And there's a special variable that does that, and it's called random.inbox. So these two variables are linked in a way. If I use an email and then use the inbox in the next step, they will point to the same place. So if I preview this action, you will see that it opens a new tab and goes to a URL where you can see all the emails that were sent to this address. Now, email delivery is sometimes a little bit unpredictable. So depending on your service provider and so on, you might need to wait a certain amount of time for the email to show up. But in this case, Airbnb already sent the emails so we can see them. And there are two emails in the inbox. Both arrived a couple of minutes ago. And I want to click on this confirmation email to find my verification link. So I want to click on this button, but I cannot just capture the screenshot of this button because it doesn't have enough context and it's identical to this button. So what I'm going to do is to take a slightly larger screenshot, just big enough to capture the context that I'm interested in. I care about the button next to this specific title, and then I'm going to move the target to make sure that the click actually happens on the button itself. And when you preview it, you will see that this is what happens here. Great, that opens the email, and it has a button that's very tempting to click for confirm that we have received this email. So another click action to do that. And now our profile is verified. And to verify that, we can use a see action that doesn't actually interact with our with the page. It simply checks that it can see the screenshot that you've just defined here. And we can preview it. Again, it will not do anything, but it will pass if it can see the screenshot. If it couldn't, and I try to preview it, it will try for a while, and then it will eventually fail. So this is our test in a basic form. Just to recap what we've done, we've created a test that starts the sign-up process, fills in a form with a bunch of data that will be different every time we run the test, including an email address that then receives an actual email that we can use to verify our account. And then at the end, we make sure that the account has been verified, that we have received this confirmation message. So the last thing I want to show you is the concept of embedded tests. Embedded tests are an extremely useful feature that will make your whole test suite much more maintainable and easy to work with. The basic idea is to take pieces of functionality or pieces of your tests that you might want to reuse in other tests and extract them into their own tests. And then you can include these tests in your in other places, and that will allow you to have certain flows defined in one place and used in many places. So if anything changes, it will be much easier to update. So we'll use this concept to extract this setting of the birth date, because this was one place where it was a little bit of an unusual flow, and I could see this changing over time. And every time it changes, we would have to update all tests that do this. So instead, we'll extract it into its own embedded test and use it in here. So let me take you through how this works. First of all, this test is, for now, completed. The changes are saved. So I'm going to close it. I remember how it's called. I'm going to create a new test, and it's also going to be targeting Airbnb. And I'll call it straight away, set the birth date. And this will not actually be a full test in its own right. It will just be a set of actions that are useful in other tests. And I created, though, like any other test, like I would any other test. So I start off with a terminal that loads the page that I want to test. Once that's done, I need to get the terminal to a stage that it will be at when this test is started. So in this case, we're already partway through the sign-up flow. So I'm going to get to that point. And now we have our birth date to interact with. So I'm just going to create exactly the same two actions that we had before. But because they take a little bit more setup than some of the others, it's worth extracting them into its own embedded test. And again, I'll remember to choose the typing option here. Now that's saved, it's good to always select these actions and preview them to make sure that they behave as you expect. Great, that worked. So now this test is complete, it's saved. I can close it. And let's go back to our sign-up test. And while the environment is loading, let's just look at what we have here. So here we want to replace actions 6 and 7 with the embedded test that we have just created. So the way we're going to do this is by inserting a new action here, and we'll actually select the birth date test as an action. So this shows up now in the list of actions as something that you can do. And you can see that it's called an embedded test, set the birth date. Now we have that. We can get rid of these two actions, which do exactly the same thing. And just to make sure that everything still works as expected, I'm going to select all these actions until the embedded test and preview them. And this again will make sure that the everything is still working. Great. So our test is now complete. It includes a bunch of interesting functionality, including an embedded test and verifying the email. Hope you found this useful. Thank you so much.